West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Hey, with us now, Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter covering racial injustice for the New York Times Magazine, Nikole Hannah-Jones. She's the creator of the 1619 Project and editor of the new book entitled The 1619 Project, A New Origin Story. And let me just say, Nikole, congratulations. We've been talking over the past year, sometimes on the sideline, and I've let you know, I've always been a 1776 guy. I've been fascinated by this entire project. But I think what I find most, remarkable about the fact is, despite the debates, the differences that all of us may have while having this debate, you have made 1619 stick in the mind, I think, of any American approaching history, that whenever you talk about 1776, regardless of your ordering of it, 1619 is now going to be a part of that. Talk about that. Talk about this year and this book.
Well, thank you for having me on. And yes, I've appreciated our many conversations, often over text, and all the times you have brought me on the show to talk about this work. So I'm just really excited that the book is in the world. You're right that 1619, I think, is now a permanent part of our lexicon when we discuss history. And I think that's critical. I don't think, as you and I have discussed, that you have to choose one or the other. And I would never argue that 1776 doesn't matter, that it's not important. Of course it is. What I'm saying is, let's also just shift that lens a little bit. And let's think about what leads up to 1776. And if we think of 1776 as an origin of freedom, we have to think of 1619 as the origin of slavery, and that those have been defining tensions in American life. And I think we still grapple with those tensions. And this project tries to help us understand why.
And that's what's so important. You talk about the defining tensions. That's why you hear these debates and it's either or. It's right, left. We talk about dialectical thinking on this show. Two things can be true at the same time. And I remember last year we were talking to Annette Gordon-Reed, and I said, how do you get past Thomas Jefferson? How do you get past the horrible things he did in his life and at the same time producing documents that freed more people than anybody else? And she said, well, that's what you want from your leader. We can hold two separate truths in our mind at the same time, 1776 and 1619. And like you said, synthesize them and figure out what we believe and have that open debate. It's exhilarating. It's supposed to be what America's about.
Of course. I mean, look, my daughter used to always ask me, is this person good or bad, Mama? And I would have to tell her most people can do really great things and most people are capable of doing bad things. And we can't think about our history as either all good or bad. And we can't think about our founders or any one person is all good or all bad. Thomas Jefferson wrote down some majestic ideals. He failed to live up to them. And what we argue is that Black Americans read those majestic ideals. Ideas matter. And they said, we're going to fight to make those true. That's a narrative I think that we can all be proud of. And we have to be able to teach our children and ourselves a complicated history about a complicated nation. And I just think the belief that if we are more honest about our history, if we are more honest about some of the really terrible things that have happened in this country, that it will somehow destroy the fabric of our country. But I actually think that you can't have reconciliation until you reconcile with the past. And once we are honest about our history, I think that's when we can start to move forward and repair.
Yeah, the New York Times, Maura Gay's with us and has a question. Maura.
Yeah, Nikole, first of all, congratulations. This has been just a joy to see you succeed. And I love watching the book tour. One of the great things about your work and about this project is that it really has centered the Black experience at the heart of American history and democracy. So much of the discussion has been, of course, about the blowback. But I'm actually wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what you've heard from Black Americans, maybe in communities of color across the country who are reading the work, children. What has that feedback been? I don't know if there's one story that stands out.
Yes, thank you so much for that question, because, we do focus a lot on the pushback, but the pushback is a sign of all of the people who actually embrace the project. You wouldn't have the level of pushback if you didn't have people who really embrace the project. And this feeling of discomfort that we've been hearing around, this critical race theory propaganda campaign, that's been the standard feeling for Black children, to feel that the way that history is taught is demeaning to them, that the way the history is taught really erases them and erases the accomplishment of Black Americans. So when we tell this story that says Black people have always been actors in the American project, that Black people have been the primary perfecters of our democracy, that this country, as W.E.B. Du Bois said, would not be what it is without her Negro people, without her Black people. That is such an empowering message for youth. And I've heard again and again from Black students who said, I feel pride in being an American for the first time. I have an understanding of what my ancestors went through and all that they accomplished, and that this makes me want to work harder. I talked to students in Chicago who were engaging with the project, and they were doing their own research. They were looking at things in their community that they'd never understood before. And they started to do historical research, and it started to make their communities make sense, their lives make sense, and it really felt empowering to them. Every person wants to see themselves in the narrative of America. We are a multiracial country. We've been multiracial since 1619, when the first Africans joined in the native people who were already here and the English settlers. And we need a history that is reflective of that.
Nikole, your line about Black Americans being perfecters of American democracy. You see it throughout history. We talk about Jefferson and Jefferson's Declaration. It was used by Frederick Douglass. Abraham Lincoln, when he finally, after Dred Scott, decided he was going to aggressively start talking about emancipation, he also used Jefferson's words and to say that the Declaration applied to a Constitution that had provisions in it that protected slaveholders. Martin Luther King used those words as well. But this example goes all the way through, talking about perfecters, all the way through to the 2020 election, where Black women in Milwaukee County, in Wayne County, in Fulton County, in Philadelphia, made the difference in the election for a lot of us who believe it was an election where everything was on the line. They were the difference, the perfecters of democracy.
That's right. I mean, it's astounding to me when people say that this project is not patriotic. One, I don't think it's the role of journalists to produce work that's patriotic or not, but I don't think you can read this and not come away with the understanding that the most ardent defenders of democracy have been those who have had to fight to have it from the beginning. and that we see that role again and again. With that said, our democracy is at a crisis point right now. We have states that are trying to make it much more difficult for Black Americans and other marginalized people to vote. We have maps that are being so heavily gerrymandered that they will instate minority rule for decades to come. And we can't keep expecting Black Americans to overcome every obstacle to save this democracy again and again. Americans have to decide that our democracy is worth it and join in ensuring that we all have the legal right to vote. Because the truth is, we call ourselves the oldest continuing democracy, but we haven't had even the resemblance of a true democracy except for 50 years with the Voting Rights Act. And as you know, the Voting Rights Act has been gutted, and we're seeing the largest wave of efforts to suppress the vote that we've seen since Jim Crow.
We have David Ignatius with the Washington Post. He has a question.
Nikole, I just want to ask you about your experiences as a journalist. For people in our business, this is a dream to write something that really becomes central to our national conversation. But there's a flip side to that, because this has become such a target for people on the right. And I just want to ask you what that's been like for you.
Thank you for that question. It has been challenging. It's not easy to go from being just a journalist to a symbol, and many people have seen me as a symbol if they love my work or if they revile my work. And, you know, we can disagree on the premise of the 1619 Project. We can say that we don't buy the arguments of the project, but the effort to really discredit the project and to discredit me as a journalist has been really hard. And it is difficult to be targeted by some of the most powerful people in the world. The president of the United States at the time, Donald Trump, was tweeting about my work, was giving speeches about my work. And that sends a type of really vile hatred into your inbox, into your voicemails, on social. It's challenging. But what I'll also say is, we don't become journalists to make powerful people comfortable. And we have to expect that when we're trying to do bold, ambitious work that really challenges power, that there's going to be a pushback. And luckily, I have a lot of support from people, and I know that the work that I'm doing matters.
It is Wednesday, the 17th of November of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, and you know what that means. Yes, a lovely velvety hollandaise sauce on an equally lovely egg dish. Oh, yummy. Hey, how are ya? We are here on a Wednesday in pretty much the middle of November. And we had that atmospheric river hit the Northwest. And when we say the Northwest in this part of Oregon, well, it's a little bit more north in the west. And Washington State, I believe now you might say it's been inundated. A lot of rain fell, and of course, because of the wildfires we've had in the region, there's not much supporting those hillsides now. And that was called denuded, in a sense. And when you denude and then inundate, well, there's going to be a bit of slippage. And there was quite a bit of slippage. So there's that. We had some of the rain, but not the copious amounts that fell a bit more north. So there's a contingent of people in the United States that would probably consider that just to be normal. Yeah, well, it just happens. Even though they've been warned ever since we were kids. Warned them and warned them and warned them, and now that it's happening, they go, stuff happens. It does. Nothing you can do about it. Oh, what can you do? Well, I don't know. Not much we can do now except just live with it. Are you kidding me? These people can't live with it. They can't live with anything. Once it starts happening to them, they can't live with it. You got this Terrio guy, the Proud Boy leader, who says, I can't stand it in jail. The conditions in here are horrendous. Well, yeah, now it's happening to you. It's horrendous. Yeah, he's complaining that there's feces in his cell. Well, stop shitting on the floor, you shit. Just by dint of the fact that this Terrio Proud Boy guy is in a cell, I've said this before, is that the literal definition of shit in a cell. Literal. But if there's actual feces on the floor, well, there ought to be some way to clean that up. And one way to clean it up is to don't put it in there to begin with. Come on, Joey. Jeez. What a whiner. And then you got this crybaby Nazi, the crying Nazi. These Nazis in Charlottesville are trying to out-Nazi each other for fun and profit, because apparently they don't have any money. That's what they're trying to report now. Oh, these people don't have any money. Oh, give me a break. They got the DeVosses. They got who else? Who else? I don't know. Would they have the Petersons? Maybe. I don't know. There's the dad and daughter duo. And all of a sudden, their name escapes me. But I bet their money is involved with the neo-Nazis. I just know it. And then you got VDare and, hell, even the Daughters of the Confederacy. They're all kicking in money to these groups. Guys. Goose stepping Proud Boys. The Jews will not surround us or replace us. The Jews will not replace us. Yeah, I got to get their stupid chants down. I mean, they're so idiotic and meaningless. Arbeit macht frei. Well, you know, we'll show you what will happen. Anyway, punch the Nazis. Otherwise, all the shit that's happening right now will happen and is. So, does Gosar get sanctioned today? Does he get censored? Yeah, I think that's on the agenda. Nancy was pretty upset last night, and rightfully so. This guy's now doubling down, and I'll tell you why. Nazis never think that anything they do is wrong. 6 million gassed. Oh, they'll quibble. It wasn't 6 million gassed. We only gassed about 4 million. The other 2 million we killed by other means. I mean, come on. Your whole argument falls apart because there's only 4 million that were gassed. The other 2 million, hey, I don't know. You know, bullets, pushed off out of a plane, you know, all sorts of different ways. So, yeah. All right, I guess my argument just totally falls apart. The neo-Nazis, the Nazis never think that anything they do is wrong, no matter how horrendous, cruel, inhumane, murderous, violent, etc., etc., etc. Paul Gosar doesn't think he did anything wrong. And that is the psychopathy of the Nazi. Mm-hmm. And then the disdain that these psychopaths look down their nose on the rest of us like they're the master class. All right. If you don't push the Nazis, you'll be living in perilous times, like now. Well, what is on the curated part of the show? Because we do have one, as we always do. We try to anchor ourselves to it. You know, hold on. The current is just whipping us about. Well, at the top, that was Nikole Hannah-Jones discussing her new work. You know, she's co-editor of the 1619 Project, A New Origin Story. You don't want critical race theory taught in the schools? Oh, my God. I'm a little curious about what exactly is going to be happening here. I did posit this question on social media earlier this morning. We all know that racial covenants, those covenants that were in housing deeds and titles, the ability to transfer title to move into particular neighborhoods, were restricted by what were known as covenants, CC&Rs. And there were instruments known as racial covenants, which prevented Jews, blacks, and, basically anybody that somebody didn't like because of their race, color, or religion from moving into a white neighborhood. These were on the books. These were the laws. Now, of course, if you ever fell under the aegis of being denied housing because of your race, religion, etc., you would look upon these covenants as, well, what shall we call them? Racist? That's what normal people would call them. In fact, one might even say that it is systemic racism because it's embedded and imbued within a law. So, if racial covenants by their very nature is an example, or are examples of systemic racism, if you teach that to some neo-Nazis kids in Texas or wherever, will you go to jail? I mean, these are real questions we have to consider. Because the Nazi will say, racial covenants, what's wrong with that? And if you're teaching my kid that racial covenants are bad, we need to hound you to death. And they do. All right. I read a little behind-the-scenes story of what's happened in Wyoming with Liz Cheney and her she was censored. The state party essentially has kicked her out of the party. Of course, voters in Wyoming who call themselves Republicans are a bit aghast because, they're the Cheneys. You don't kick a Cheney to the curb in the state. What are you, some sort of neo-Nazi? And that's exactly what they are. They don't care. So there are actual, proper Republicans. I don't want to call them good Republicans because in my construct, a good Republican is like a good Nazi. And maybe they are. But there are some of these proper Republicans, proper conservatives who, like I said, are a bit aghast at what's happening. And they're not buying into it. They are wondering what the hell they are doing and that the state party has gotten a bit out of control. Now, as just regular voters, who, as one fellow opined, or not opined, but gave a factual statement, voters like him pretty much keep their head down, go to work. They don't voice their opinions in public. Usually it's at the burger joint, the diner, maybe the bar. Believe me, they'll opine for people to hear, just not with a bullhorn in the town square. When they do that, they go to the voting booth. That's where they express their opinion, according to this fellow. And that's a very familiar behavior. So Liz Cheney is kicked out of the Republican Party, and this guy goes, what? She registers as a Republican? You're a Republican. What is this about? Well, basically what this voter's not supposedly getting at first is that they are not going to allow her to use the Republican moniker to run for office. She can vote any way she wants. All right. Well, like I said, if you don't punch the Nazi, this is the kind of stuff you get. But there's pushback even within, shall we say, the proper Republican circles. Actually good to hear. On the rest of the menu, I don't know how we got from Nikole Hannah-Jones' introduction there at the top to Liz, but we did. Well, on the rest of the menu, Cancun Ted Cruz introduced a bill that would add $28 billion with a B to the national debt. Yeah, they don't care when they do it. Iowa's GOP Governor Kim Reynolds is accused of misusing COVID relief funds again. And a GOP-majority court has been chosen to deny Biden's vaccine mandate. Yeah. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Australia has pledged to invest $73 million U.S. in quantum science as critical technology. You know, are we going to let those down under top us? Come on. And a Philippines group is seeking to bar Marcos Jr. from the presidential race because of a conviction for tax evasion. Well, in this country, that gives you top-notch billing with the Republican Party. Maybe he should run here. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and I say the. And the chat room link is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. If you would look across the page from the chat room link, you will notice the link to our Patreon page. And that is there because, well, even though the bulk of how we do this comes out of our own wallets, we would still be unable to do it without you, and we need your help because the costs of software, just the machinery alone is a daunting task, but then the bills just keep increasing and sometimes treble-fold. And that's bothersome. It is, because we pay our bills. We're not like the other side, those scofflaws. Yeah, deadbeats. We don't do that here because, well, I don't know. Do we have a moral code? Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But we pay our bills, and for some reason that allows us to fly under the radar and continue this resistance against the Nazi takeover of America. And, you know, there's other forces too, so we call them Nazi sympathizers. They're all in a league. Anyway, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, and if you could afford to send those funds our way once a month, it really does help us put a dent in those bills that we have to pay on a monthly basis. And sometimes the big bills come in once a year. And, got to think about saving up for that. Anyway, thank you for your generosity. And we will give you a little pre-thanks for generosity in the future. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. You go to @NetrootsRadio, and there it is. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom for doing so. Follow me on Twitter @JusticePutnam. I incidentally post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up and posted on Twitter and other social media platforms. You know who they are. Follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, well, it's a Wednesday morning. Trash day around here. Gonna have to get the trash out. Okay, let's dive into this first. God, I hate this guy. And when I say hate, I mean that rhetorical, because I don't really believe in hate. But tremendous dislike, a visceral repulsion. Yeah, Ted Cruz does that for me. Does he do that to you? I think so. There's I don't know. It could almost be a special behavior. Could be, but anyway, Ted Cruz is repulsive by definition. And Josh Israel is from the American Independent is going to tell us all about it. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, a vocal opponent of any legislation that increases the national debt, filed a bill on Monday that would effectively add billions to the deficit by repealing part of President Joe Biden's newly signed infrastructure package. The bill would specifically roll back one of the funding mechanisms that pays for the new law's $550 billion investment in roads, bridges, water systems, broadband, electric vehicles, and clean energy infrastructure. The section Cruz is seeking to eliminate would increase reporting requirements for cryptocurrency, alternative money systems like Bitcoin, to make sure that profits from those investments can be taxed the same as others. Cruz, who unsuccessfully tried to get that provision removed before the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act became law, decried it in a Tuesday press release as a devastating attack on an emerging industry. Wow. You like those shady little investment schemes, don't you, Ted? According to a nonpartisan joint committee on taxation, the cryptocurrency rules would bring in an estimated $28 billion in additional revenue over the next decade, essentially paying for about 5% of the new infrastructure investments. Cruz's repeal proposal contains no offset. We always have to have offsets. Now, that means that the lost revenue would simply be covered by more borrowing from the federal government. They know how to borrow because they never pay it back. The Texas senator's proposal seems to fly in the face of his own past rhetoric opposing the infrastructure bill. In July, after Biden and a bipartisan group of senators agreed on the infrastructure framework, Cruz and 8 GOP colleagues said they could not support it because it might mean more borrowing, and because Democrats might also pass Biden's Build Back Better climate change and caregiving infrastructure proposal separately. There is a day of reckoning if we don't get our fiscal house in order, they wrote. But with our national debt growing out of control and Democrats dedicated to passing a 100% partisan blowout spending package totaling $3.5 trillion, we cannot support any additional deficit spending on Joe Biden's, Nancy Pelosi's, Chuck Schumer's, and Bernie Sanders' liberal wish list. Oh, boy. That was rather taxing, wasn't it? Yes, it was. As the Senate debated the bipartisan infrastructure plan in early August, Cruz denounced it as a trap funded in part by money we're borrowing from China and debt we're putting on our kids and grandkids. Did I hear any of these objections when they passed that, $3 trillion tax cut that went to, Elon Musk and friends? Once the bill passed in the Senate on a 69-30 bipartisan vote over his objections, Cruz released a press statement warning, even if you count the gimmicks and fake offsets, this bill will increase the deficit by over $250 billion. He added, if like me, you don't trust the Washington swamp's funny math, we're about to plunge ourselves even further into debt. America is already $28.6 trillion in debt, and it's set to skyrocket even higher. Well, part of that national debt was incurred by your friend, the mobbed-up Russian asset that occupied the White House for 4 years, who then staged a violent coup to retain power. Huh, Ted? What about that national debt? I heard no objections then. None of us did. They go through all of this dance, all of this elaborate ballet. Little twirl here, little hop there. Here, let me lift you by the waist. Just to keep from allowing Joe Biden a win. It is so petty. It is so high schoolish. But you know what? We allow it to happen at our peril. We cannot allow it to happen because it will be our peril. A Cruz spokesman did not immediately respond to a request for comment. for this story. Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is also out of the American Independent and also by Josh Israel. Iowa State Auditor, Democrat Rob Sand, released a report on Monday that finds the office of Republican Governor Kim Reynolds improperly used $448,449, what no sense, in coronavirus pandemic relief funds to pay her staff salaries. The annual review of the state's spending for the fiscal year that ended on June 30th of 2020 makes note of requirements for the use of federal COVID relief funding. And the auditor's review of the state's financial records showed that the office of the governor used $448,448.86. Oh, there's the cents. On the CRF, the COVID Relief Fund, to reimburse the salaries and benefits of 21 Office of the Governor employees for the period of March 15th of 2020 through June 30th of 2020. The reimbursement was in the form of an internal transfer from the Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, known as ISEM, from their allocation of administration funds from the state's CRF, COVID Relief Fund. The $448,448.86 reimbursement represents 62.59%, not 62.6, but 62.59% of the total salaries benefits of the 21 employees for the period. It says that that 20 of the 21 employees included in the above calculations were governor employees prior to the pandemic, and each employee earned and was paid only their approved biweekly salary. Their approved biweekly salary agrees to their gross pay, approved and expected prior to any knowledge of a pandemic. What is not clear is why these salaries were not included in the governor's budget set prior to the fiscal year and prior to the pandemic, the audit notes. Based on this information, we conclude that the budget shortfall was not a result of the pandemic. Reynolds told reporters in September that the expenditures were allowable because her staff's roles had significantly changed due to the virus. Really? They went into campaign mode? A spokesperson for Reynolds told the AP her team spent a vast majority of their time responding to the pandemic and that many worked 7 days a week out of the State Emergency Operations Center to provide direct support to Iowans, and the spokesperson promised to provide documentation to back that up. But Sand noted that the governor had not produced any such evidence when repeatedly asked to do so during the audit. If you're coming up with documentation after the fact, after you said twice you don't have it, that should be concerning too, he said. Now, Sand's 2020 audit found that Reynolds had improperly used $21 million in CARE Act funding intended for pandemic relief to pay for computer software that the state had planned to buy before COVID-19 hit. In December, the state had to return those funds to the federal government. Despite her claims, Reynolds did little to curb the coronavirus's spread and actively made her lack of response to the COVID-19 pandemic a political selling point. Mulvihill of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Challenges to President Joe Biden's COVID-19 vaccine mandate for private employers will be consolidated in the U.S. Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, a panel dominated by judges appointed by Republicans. You know, Federalist Society judges. Those kind. The Cincinnati-based court was selected yesterday in a random drawing using ping pong balls, a process employed when challenges to certain federal agency actions are filed in multiple courts. The selection could be good news for those challenging the administration's vaccine requirement, which includes officials in 27 Republican-led states, employers, and several conservative and business organizations. They argue the U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Administration does not have the authority to impose the mandate. The challenges, along with some from unions that said the vaccine mandate did not go far enough, were made this month in 12 circuit courts under an arcane system. It was up to the clerk of the Judicial Panel on Multi-District Litigation to select a ping pong ball from a bin to choose where the cases would be heard. It was a favorable outcome for Republicans. 11 of the full 16 full-time judges in the Sixth were appointed by Republican presidents. Accounting for one of the Republican-appointed judges, Helena White, who often sides with judges appointed by Democrats, and adding senior judges who are semi-retired but still hear cases, the split is 19-9 in favor of the Republicans. 6 of the full-time judges were appointed by Donald Trump. So in other words, the virus will win. Well, that brings us to our break, and let's hope the virus doesn't win, even if the Sixth Circuit says, vaccine mandates, you can't do that. We'll see about that. Anyway, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Eternal Questions. Warning, slight spoilers. Okay, here's a writing exercise for you. 7,000 years ago, celestial beings sent 10 powerful immortals to Earth to do two things: to kill an infestation of alien monsters and to jumpstart human civilization. After 3,000 or 4,000 years, the immortals complete their mission and are ordered to stay on planet without interfering with the developments they've set into motion. So they settle in for a few more thousand years until it's today, and the monsters reappear and must be defeated again, now. Do you A, start in the present day with your super people quietly living among us and give us the preceding 7,000 years in flashbacks, or do you B, start 7,000 years ago and tell your story linearly? The downside of A is it's hard for us, the audience, to care about where these characters are in their lives and relationships until we get all their history. The upside is when we're finally caught up and it's time for the immortals to defend the Earth, we believe in their emotional investment because we started with them established in today's world. B sees the reverse. The upside is you live that history with the characters and bond with them, but then it's harder to buy their commitment to the world because most of the movie for you has been about their commitments to each other. So which path do you choose? Here's the thing, there's no right answer. There's just the fact that it doesn't take much before the breadth of your story makes it difficult to effectively plot it in 2+ hours. The production crew of Marvel's Eternals chose option A, the flashbacks, and I felt its downside. You might not, but I did. This is not a failing of the film. Like I said, you lose something either way. It just means you should know to give Eternals time. It's going to take them half the film before they can say, okay, now that we've laid that foundation, now we can ask some interesting questions. Oh, and here's the slight spoiler. If you think that question is, do we kill the monsters? Fortunately, the Eternals is much more interesting than that. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
When a federal employee illegally and flagrantly uses their federal job for political campaigning, there are serious consequences, right?
I'm Baratunde Thurston from The Onion, and also, mother. You're listening to the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The Hatch Act, which has been the law since the late 1930s, prohibits federal employees from using their federal position for political campaigning. That law has been in the news due to a recently released report by the Office of Special Counsel, a report that documents myriad violations of the Hatch Act by senior advisors to President Donald Trump, including Jared Kushner and Stephen Miller and Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, among others. Here's the rub. For senior political appointees, the Office of Special Counsel can only recommend discipline. There's no fine. And the only person who can impose a punishment is the president. And the person who violated the law can't be fired from a position they no longer hold. So the impact on these Trump appointees will be nothing. The Protect Our Democracy Act going forward would put some teeth into this law, but that legislation is languishing in Congress. The scariest part? These Hatch Act violations are yet another example of how those in power are using their power, including gerrymandering and voter suppression and campaign violations, to maintain that power. It's time to batten down the hatches.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1785. That was the day the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York was founded. 22 skilled craftsmen with the motto, "By hammer in hand, all arts do stand," met on Pine Street to form a benevolent organization that could provide culture, education, and social services to craftsmen and their families. 2 months later, founders met for their annual meeting. They represented many of the city's trades, including hatters, butchers, sailmakers, bolters, and comb makers. In his book, Chance Democratic, historian Sean Willett states, the General Society was intended to be a semi-political umbrella organization for all of the city's independent mechanics, to help oversee the trades and secure favorable legislation from local and national government. The group captured the ideal of mutuality and craft pride essential to artisan fraternities since the Middle Ages. The General Society opened one of the city's first free schools at a time when there were no public schools. It established a tuition-free Mechanics Institute, the General Society Library, and lecture series. The Mechanics Institute, founded in 1858, continues to provide free evening trades-related instruction. The library, established in 1820, is the second oldest library in New York City. It is also one of the few remaining membership-circulated libraries. Its collections and archives span 2 centuries. The General Society continues its tradition of public lectures in the form of the Labor, Literature, and Landmark series. More recently, it has added the Artesian Lecture series that features lectures by master artisans. The series also promotes the work and art of skilled craftsmen. The General Society has been at its current location at 20 West 44th Street since 1885.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently brisk, chilly. Well, some might even call it freezing, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Cloudy skies today with some morning fog, highs topping out around 53. Winds will be light and variable. Cloudy overnight with lows near 40, so I guess we'll be in a warming trend during the nights, eh? Winds light and variable. And then tomorrow will be cloudy with a chance of rain shower, highs near the mid-50s, winds light and variable. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon continue to rise. How is that? We now stand at 242,067 confirmed cases, and our deceased continue to rise as well. We have now increased to 345 officially deceased. When will it stop? Well, let's hope it will slow down, because apparently people don't care. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is good at 26 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.18 inches. Visibility is down to a half mile, and relative humidity is at 88%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 53 and partly cloudy. Paris is 55 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 60 degrees and cloudy with a thunderstorm advisory. Eh? Do they say A in Italy? No, they don't, but I just did. Kyiv is 31 and fair. Kabul is 44 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 68 and clear. Tokyo is 53 degrees and fair. Sydney, Australia is 63 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 51 degrees and fair. And New York is 50 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Australia's Prime Minister said today more than 60 areas of technology were critical to the national interest and promised millions of dollars in funding to keep strategic rivals from controlling industries from cybersecurity to medicine. In recent months, Australia has pledged to spend billions of dollars to modernize its economy and cut dependence on China by spurring manufacturing and industries, such as resources and critical minerals, as well as backing low-emission technology. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said Australia has identified 63 technologies that Canberra cannot allow others to dominate. These include advanced cyber, genomics, and novel antibiotics. In most cases, having diverse, well-functioning markets can meet our technology needs, but in some cases, for critical technologies, we need to ensure we can access and use such technologies reliably and safely in good times and bad. The investment will help secure future economic opportunities for Australian businesses, create local jobs, and importantly, it will keep Australians safe. While Morrison highlighted 63 technologies, Australia will initially focus on supporting 9, the first of which will be quantum technology. Morrison pledged $73 million US, that would be 100 million Australian, to commercialize quantum research and forge links with global markets and supply chains. Australia is working with like-minded countries, liberal democracies in particular, to ensure global technology rules and norms reflect those values, liberal, democratic values. Such is the importance of the technology for Australia. Canberra can also impose restrictions on domestic universities, conducting joint research with foreign institutions across the 63 areas. Home Affairs Minister Karen Andrews announced new rules governing universities that are designed to reduce the threat of foreign interference. Quantum technology, based on core principles of physics, is still in its infancy, but has become a darling of investors aspiring to revolutionize industries from healthcare and finance to artificial intelligence and weather forecasting.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Karen Lema of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The son of late Philippines dictator Ferdinand Marcos, an early frontrunner for the May election, is facing a second petition seeking to bar him from the presidential race, centered on a tax evasion conviction nearly 3 decades ago. The complaint, filed today at the Election Commission by a group called the Campaign Against the Return of the Marcoses and Martial Law, argued the conviction should have perpetually disqualified Ferdinand Marcos Jr. from holding or running for office. He was found guilty in 1995 of failing to file income tax returns from 82 to 85, while governor of Ilocos Norte province, a verdict upheld 2 years later by an appeals court. He has continuously neglected his penalty and disrespected the rule of law by running and filing his candidacy, knowing in fact that he is a convicted criminal, lawyer Howard Kalea told reporters after the filing. Marcos's spokesperson did not immediately respond to a request for comment. They never do. The Internal Revenue Code states that a public officer convicted of a tax crime will be barred for life from holding public office, voting, and participating in any election. Since his conviction, however, Marcos has been elected governor, congressman, and senator, and ran unsuccessfully for the vice presidency. Rule of law is for little people. The Marcos family is one of the most famous dynasties in the Philippines, and despite his fall from grace after a 1986 people power revolution, it has retained his wealth and far-reaching and powerful connections. I guess so. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.